a lot of urban land records. And obviously, with the urban land records, the level of complexity we're dealing with because of the vertical sprawl, because of smaller plot sizes, it's a slightly more technically more difficult problem to crack as compared to just looking at the countryside where the data in itself is much more manageable per se. So the idea is like what kind of, I mean, how do we enable more fair and equitable digitization of the government land records, of the urban land records in general? And though there are a lot of programs like the Swamitwa, like other government programs, which are working towards digitization of the land records, but the question is then what next? What happens once the digitization gets done? How do we enable different use cases for different stakeholders on top of those land records? And those, I mean, A, asking ourselves the question that what kind of use cases are needed? How do those land records become accessible in a way where they're interoperable and usable by different players? And then what sort of use cases are needed for different kinds of stakeholders? I mean, there are more business-oriented use cases like a title insurance, like having better access to credit for different sort of users who currently are not there within the credit realm as much. But then there are also other kinds of things we are talking about. I mean, do the land records and does this digitization then help in people in slums actually access better services? Is that something that happens? A couple of so that's the broad thing which we wanted to sort of discuss and explore it both from a social lens on what are the social questions we need to take into account while doing that, and also have a technical sort of lens to it. What's the tech perspective on it? So that's the broad agenda for the session. Maybe I'll let a few the panelists introduce themselves, and then we could start. Adhru, you want to pass the mic? Yeah, you start and then.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Dhruva. I work for a company called Satcher. Satcher is a Earth observation satellite data analytics company. So we specialize in taking data from satellites and making them usable. We work across agriculture, urban, and infrastructure type of use cases. We're also about to launch our own satellite, so becoming a fully integrated data analytics company, right from data generation to solutions. So obviously, my perspective on this is on the technical side on how you bring such, vast data to use for these types of use cases. But yeah, I'll hand over to the other panelists.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shahana Chatraj. I am the research director for the World Resources Institute's Global Center for Equitable Development, which focuses a lot on land issues and governance, mostly in the context of indigenous land rights, but also increasingly looking at urban land tenure and rights, and also how land tenure and land rights in the context of climate change and sustainability. Previously, I was a director of research director for WRI India, and I'm a interdisciplinary social scientist. My work has been on urban property rights, land tenure, informal systems, and the governance of these kinds of informal systems, which are informal market systems as well within urban areas.
Hello, my name is Shirish Rawan. I'm a founder of non-profit organization called Earthsight Foundation. This is about 1.5-year-old organization. And this organization I have started just to bridge the gap that geospatial and space technologies has not really gone to the grassroots level. They are stuck within the government use cases. So my organization is completely dedicated to take on board all the elected leaders who actually drive the development programs at grassroots and enable them geospatially to use the technology for right from village development plans to all the scales. Previously, I worked with United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs for 14 years, United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime for 4 years, so 18 years in UN, and before that I was with CDEC. He's my colleague sitting here. I pass on to him for introduction.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sajeevan G, working as a scientist in CDAC. CDAC, Center for Development of Advanced Computing. It's mostly into supercomputing, parallel computing, but we are into almost, okay, audible or? So we are into almost all domain, including the geospatial technology. I'm directly into the geospatial technology. I will also share some of my experience. I am working with the national program PMGSY, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, which will relate something to the land records for the national level. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Um, yeah. Perfect. So I think, I mean, it's funny. I've been forced to moderate this session because I have a lot to do with tech, very less to do with land. Yeah, my association with land has been probably the last 2 years of very deeply engaging with land stack and the folks. But anyway, maybe I'd like to start with first laying out uh, the ground on, I mean, when we're talking about land, urban land record data, there's multiple different levels of diversity we're talking about. I mean, there's land records per se, which haven't been in many cases updated since the colonial times often, to multiple different kinds of data sources which convey the reality. One of them being whether it's the property tax or it's the rental agreements. I mean, it's a very multimodal system with 30 different parameters or 100 different parameters which are conveying that reality. How do we even see all of this coming together and integrating, and potentially what could be some of the use cases for it? I mean, what's a good way to look at it? And maybe I'd like to start with Shahana, who understands the social side of things the most, and then go on from there.
Thank you. So, you know, my first engagement with issues of the complexity of land records and how intimately they're tied with issues of planning, of governance, of public services and things was when right out of, so I have an undergraduate in architecture. My first job was in an urban village called Ayanagar in Delhi, where you had, it was an urbanizing area, and I think those are some of the most important places because you have a change, you have the marketization and commodification of land here that was used for different purposes. It was all entirely informal, but that didn't stop investment, right? And the land records there had not been updated since colonial times. And then there was like, you know, and this sort of applies in every sphere when it comes to urban, that there's a huge number of institutions, each one is siloed, each one has different functions. And at that point, I was involved in an exercise that it was manually trying to map out land parcels and map out and figure out a system to protect what was left of the commons then. And eventually I left and went to do a PhD, and I found later that, you know, not much of that had happened, right? The commons weren't protected, the development sort of happened apace, and there was no system to plan and provide services in these areas. They're sort of like, they're visible to everyone. We can all see that, but they're not legible to the state. And I think one of the points I want to make here when it comes to digitization is that land and tenure is actually a very complex and contested thing. So I think that's a really important thing. I don't think there will be a technical or a silver bullet, and because property is a relationship, so is tenure, and it's within these urban areas, it's a rapidly changing thing. There are multiple claims, there are contested claims, there are multiple layers of how the state sees it. So there's the actual land records and the revenue records, then there's the way the municipal and the interests of the municipal officials and the municipal administration, which is often, I mean, their job is to provide services but also collect taxes. There's the interests of people, the users and people whose livelihood depends on the land. There's a larger common public interest around preserving land and resources and sustainability. And there are also competing contested claims. There is also what the master plan deems that the use of land is. And I think that unless we actually grapple with that complexity, and begin analyzing it and figuring out what we actually want these land records to do, beyond actually commodify land and make it easily available for the market. And I think that's partly why the rural picture may be a bit simpler, because a lot of it is to consolidate land and make it available, say, for private investment and for financialization. I think that well, the use case, as you say, in urban areas is not very clear. For me, I think the most fundamental use case would probably be for better planning and decision making. But again, that is not going to be a tech solution, because I think unless we have stronger and more effective and more democratic governance and planning institutions, it seems unlikely that the digitization itself will lead to the outcomes that we want. So yeah, I don't know if that answers it, but I think one thing is to just accept and begin grappling with the enormous complexity of land uses and land relations and tenure relations within different sorts of urban areas in India.
I mean, it'll be nice to hear you, Sajeevan. I mean, the government perspective on. Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Because though directly I'm not involved with this, I have a lot of experience, people sharing a lot of their concerns regarding land records. I can also share my personal experience implementing the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana national level, because all these states are utilizing the digitization work we are actually carried it out. Because way back in 2014 when we started the thing, as he was also talking about the spatial accuracy, the interoperability, so that was a real problem. People were digitizing, but the layers were off when we talked to each other, maybe 100 meters, even half a kilometer. That was a serious issue when we started it. So there was a serious guideline which we made it. Otherwise, what we used to have is we used to have scanning, digitization, then what is that digitization, all these processes used to happen, then the mosaic. All those things that, because what we needed is, when we talk about roads, 1 meter difference, it's okay for us. So when it comes to land, it is a serious issue. Maybe I will share what it could be. See, 1 meter difference is okay, something like that I can say. But it should not be half a kilometer away. For some of the states, when we carried out the QC, some of the times the layers were in Arabian Sea. You could even see that. And that much issues, and people were actually, private companies were taking, for each project they were submitting the same thing. So those things are the issues. But at a national level, we have created it, and it is shared. And now there's a software, WebGIS software, all the states are using it, and the layers are shared under GeoSadak, what we call the PMGSY National GIS. Students can go there, they can utilize the layers, and so many research people, including WRI, I think somebody was requesting me to update it, that's available. So let me share something about land records, coming back to this. So you were talking about how to improve it, how to go ahead. So what we need to do is, at some particular level, for example, if I have the layers today, maybe even if it is within 1 meter accuracy, suppose the best case, I'm expecting I may be getting the 1 meter accuracy, it will be very good for, at least for the roads. For example, we want to create new roads. So at least I will, from the current layer, which are the plots to be acquired along those lines. The PMGSY is already creating new roads, new alignment, around 25,000 habitations are going to be connected under this PMGSY 4. So at least we will come to know which are the plots coming into that, which can be acquired, how much area has to be acquired. That is pretty good. Such type of thing. Probably if we have maybe 1 meter accuracy right now, the plots which are, whatever we are creating it, at least we can take out the road alignments from that. So many things can be taken out from the layers. When it comes to interoperability, I doubt, because when land records are digitized, what is required is we need to go into the domain side. The survey, people go and put some, if I have a rectangular plot, What important is just 4 stones. And we need to take the locations of those 4 stones only. And if you look at our guidelines, what we are incorporating a lot of inaccuracy through we are scanning map projections, okay? Because if you look into PFJSA, there is no map projection. That's a type of, when you have the projection, you have the raster vector conversion. When we convert raster, then we convert it to vector, there is an inaccuracy involved. And even we are talking about even our course. When course location itself, we are talking about 5 centimeter accuracy. Look at the things when we are actually taking those coordinates from the whatever instruments we have, whatever may be instruments, and collecting those coordinates. And those coordinates will be off by something. So that we have to accept. And if my plot is there, if you say it is off by 1 feet, definitely I will not accept. If you go into that level of, and I've also talked about somebody in Maharashtra, we were also associated with some of the discussions with Maharashtra. We were also trying to put the property card along with the latitude, longitude. I think that is going to be a blunder. Because when you have projected coordinate and when you are talking about the latitude, longitude from that, it is going to be a serious issue. For that, we need to understand what is the latitude, longitude you are talking about. And we are already projected the things, already projected into that, then we are trying to take out the latitude, longitude from that. So probably the guidelines, because we cannot change the implementation. When I had interaction with implementers, and they cannot have that much flexibility, a lot of things. They are already having the core station, then they are setting up the drones and they are trying to take it out. Then they have the satellite data, which is all satellite data. When they say satellite data, which is already projected. Then we are trying to take up the coordinate from that. That will definitely have a spatial trip. I will be happy if at least 1 feet accuracy, if somebody, at least one village somebody has created, I will be more than happy. But we might say, compared to base map, you might have a base map, you may talk about the accuracy with reference to the base map. But that is good for me with reference to my map. But how far it is offset from the realistic WGS80, for whatever the datum which you talk about, there will be a datum. But when you're measuring a meter things and a projection, that is okay. But when you're talking about latitude, longitude, that's going to be a serious issue unless and until these discussions are done at higher end. And my great suggestion is please don't share the latitude, longitude of these things. And even people are talking about AI to extract those plots. But plot doesn't need these boundaries, and they are not accurate. Plots require only those survey stones. And then it is a straight line. AI is going to extract the boundaries, whatever is. If there is a vegetation, it will take it that way. If there is a boundary wall, it will take that boundary wall. But that is not the accurate one. But the accurate one is the stones, the survey stones, which actually the surveys are placed in. So I think from this, because normally people call me to share some of the things, I was avoiding it, but I thought this is a high time we should share some of my feelings with reference to land records and this, because since I did not directly work on that, but working with the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, and we achieved a quite accuracy and people are using it at national level, software layers, I thought should share some of the hints so that your policy, your guidelines can be improved, and we should tell what purpose we are creating it. I cannot say to farmers, okay, this is your latitude, longitude, this is your boundary, and this is final. And it will have a lot of litigations later rather than having because tomorrow I will go and claim my latitude, longitude authorized to buy, the government is this, which may fall in somebody else's neighbor's land. So these things can be taken care of going forward. I think I should not overshoot your time. Probably in a later stage I can share much more. Thank you.
So I think what I'm hearing, I mean, there's almost like 3 different thought streams. I mean, there's this whole idea of accuracy and how accuracy is, and especially accuracy in what some of the examples you took even were more around the rural space where accuracy is still a slightly easier issue as compared to the urban. I mean, it's not easy by any standard in the rural space as well, but just relatively speaking. So there's accuracy versus there's the social sort of fabric or the social reality. And I do see tech probably getting slowly and slowly more and more accurate. And I know, Shirish and Dhruv probably have been working in that space of how there is increasingly tech is achieving accuracy, sub-centimeter accuracy, and probably, I mean, it will be, it's very imaginable 20 years down the line, probably we have the level of accuracy which currently drones give at the satellite level. I mean, I don't know, I don't understand that, but that's one side, but it'll never be able to solve the social problem. I mean, the conflict is something which AI can never address or never resolve, however much accurate it might become. We might have the best representation of a building with complete 3D modeling and a digital twin, but that does not still solve that, oh, does this house belong to me, or what happens with that conflict? So that's one side of things, and the other side is what I am calling the use case, or what does all this enable? What does digitization enable, and for whom? Does it enable a better governance by the state? Does it enable better surveillance by the state? Does it enable better credit by the bankers? What does it really enable? So I mean that's the piece which I'm interested in, especially sort of asking Dhruv and Shirish, and maybe then we can go back to Shahana and Sajeevan, that, I mean, I know both of you in some capacity, especially Satshore, has been working on getting different kinds of data together and building this comprehensive sort of image. So I mean, if you could just maybe walk us through what is that different type of data, what kind of considerations you are taking around that, because I know, I mean, you're also working with some of the best bureaucrats who've been wanting to enable much more than just digitization. So, I mean, what is the imagination right now, and how are some of these issues sort of taken care of?
Yeah, sure. So at Satcher, I think our genesis was actually agriculture. So we were one of the first companies to actually use satellite data to monitor crops across the country. Today we have 18 different crop models, so we can basically monitor cash crops, rice and wheat and sugarcane, cotton across the country. And one of the things that we built a few years ago was a product that basically allows banks to lend to farmers. So Kisan Credit Card scheme, when it was launched, there was no way for the bank to understand the capacity for the farmer to repay, right, once they provide a line of credit. So how do you get alternative data to enable that credit line to be opened for the farmer? So what we did was we combined this ability to generate crop maps along with being able to detect features like irrigation and soil quality and et cetera, from satellite data. We were able to build up a score with the banks to say, okay, if a farmer had grown XYZ crop in the last 5 years, we could look at it from a historic satellite data, and we could sort of guesstimate what kind of income he could have generated based on the local mandi prices, right? So we combine all of this data to arrive at this score. Today, we are already working with this top 6 banks in the country who are sort of offering these loans to farmers. And I just wanted to highlight that as an example of how we've combined these multiple data sources to facilitate, financial inclusion for communities which didn't have access to this before. So if we thought of the process before, they would have to send somebody to the farmer, talk to him, gather data. It used to take 3, 4, 5 months before that credit could be enabled. Today it's done in a few minutes. But kind of talking about urban scenario, I think, as you said, we've been in discussions with some of the top bureaucrats who are trying to bring different data sets together, and you mentioned these 30 different data sets. One of the problems we've seen is that there is no standard sort of data sharing across these, there's no common identifier. There's no way to sort of bring, let's say, a property tax and a registration and a utility bill together, right? So those are the kind of challenges that we are trying to address. I think the intent behind this that I get from it is two parts. One is land is still a pretty fragmented asset if you look at it, and it allows for a lot of corruption because of that. At least the bureaucrats we are talking to want to eliminate that by bringing the transparency it's required. So I think that's one of the main drivers behind it, at least the stated aim. I think the other thing is, some of the speakers have touched upon this, is we don't even know where land is allocated and for what purpose, right? I think that the land use plans that get created and what actually gets reflected on the ground are two totally different things. I think by having this map and keeping it up to date is probably the more important thing. Allows us then to track, how land is being allocated and for what. And to that extent, how we can then provide intervention to the communities that need it. Because today we have no idea where that slum is, what that land was supposed to be used for. So I think those are the aspects I've seen in terms of where the intent is from a government perspective. We think that, as you said before, Rishabh, in terms of allowing lending or allowing insurance, I think those are the obvious sort of business use cases that I see opening up. But yeah, this has been our experience.
The non-obvious one.
Yeah, yeah, maybe, yeah.
So let me get to the very practical cases of how enormous is this job. So before my United Nations and CDAC, I was with an organization called Maharashtra Remote Sensing Application Center, which is the organization that caters the geospatial requirement of this particular state, Maharashtra, which is a very big state actually. On 1 to 50,000 scale, we have 400 topo sheets that cover this particular state. And there was a project that came that said, geo-rectify all the land records of entire state. And this was about when I was still there, but after certain few, months I left. So I witnessed some of the things. So at that time, as you said, that it is a transition, it's a journey of creating the land records or digitizing this. At that time, the base data available at that time was a 4.8 meter resolution, but very well rectified. That means it was a good base map. Resolution was not very good, but still the boundaries, parcel boundaries were identifiable. And on the other side, you have all these ancient paper maps that show the parcel. So entire job was to digitize those parcels which are on the papers and completely rubber sheet them, stretch them and put it on the base map of 4.8 meter resolution satellite image. And that is the first attempt this particular state carried out in just early 2000. And that was completely done for entire Maharashtra, all the land records, first time from the paper maps, which were not at all geographically rectified, to the rectified land record boundaries. So this was done. This was enormous at that time, whatever base map available was done. But then, problem is, land records keep changing on daily basis. A lot of transaction happens. How you cope up with that particular enormous land record changes, mutations, amalgamation happening, that is where we are still lagging behind. But conversion has been done. Now, what Rishabh said is about urban. Urban comes very special problem, as he said. And over the years, as it is a journey, because now we have got a much better 30 centimeter base map, which is very well geo-rectified. So that is helping documenting or digitizing the urban land use maps. And that has been also done by the same organization. Although I left that organization, I traveled, but I keep in touch with them. I gave complete updates of what is the progress. So most of the urban, but I would, rather than saying urban parcel or land use or land records, I would say land records of the growth center. So for example, this particular city is a Pune city. It has a corporation boundary limit, but it also has Pune Metropolitan Development Authority, which covers 60 kilometers around the Pune city. Within that, there are number of growth centers, and each growth center is growing in enormous way. It is a town which is growing. Every year you go to that town and you don't recognize, oh, there was an empty space here, but today it is not. So these growth centers are converting the land records. A lot of builders are blocking, say, hundreds of hectares of land, and they're selling it as a plots that they don't come on the land record. 100 hectares sold to some, say, 2,000 owners of the plot owners. Their names are there in that piece, but they don't have the authorized boundaries. And these are the complexities that come on the urban land use. When you talk about growth centers, that how to maintain the land records of the growth centers around the cities. But thanks to improving technologies, like we have got very good GPS trackers, and you all heard in the Samit presentation, control points and all that, you have got good drone images, and that has helped in a big way to also digitize the urban or growth centers land records. That has also been taken care in Maharashtra to a great extent. Now, what is left and very enormous job is how to make it a dynamic, how to preserve the past records. Because now, for example, again a real case, I am selling one of my plot near Pune, which is urban land record, and it is about, I would say, 11,000 square feet plot. I'm selling. Now the buyer wants to verify 30 years of history of that before he pays me. And this needs to become on as an attachment to that particular land record. And that is an enormous job has to be done. And this is where we are looking at improved technologies like a blockchain technologies, which will keep the archives and maintain it, and then nobody can just tamper it or proper without legal permission of somebody. And to that level, I think people have not reached. Until and unless we reach to that particular level, this digitization of land record will not get into real business. But as you said, Rishabh, very clearly, this is a journey that right from rectifying the land records to coming to this level of growth centers, achieving some centimeter accuracy. I think it has been a great. Blockchain has been introduced only a few years back, and blockchain in geospatial is also a couple of years only people started talking. I think it will make a lot of progress, and in coming years, we'll definitely see that land records and all these related transactions will get into real action. And regarding the use cases and business aspects, maybe we can come later because others have to assist with. Yeah.
No, I mean, if you have some thoughts on the use cases, maybe you could take a minute or two.
Okay,
before
just I wanted to say the difference between the rural land records and urban land records are huge. But because of metropolitan development authorities in several cities in India, the towns which are within, say, 20, 30, 40, 50 kilometers from the big cities are becoming growth centers. And there are a lot of business opportunities because there suddenly what you need is, okay, because of this growth center, we need certain industrial area to be developed. Certain industrial park, IT industry or automobile industry or say chip making industry, or suddenly there is a big land requirement. Or also because now India has got a space policy, and then government of India is looking for developing a space hubs in many states. So you have to allocate land for such kind of thing. So in such cases, all these land records are important because you have to acquisition of that land becomes very important. And we have to acquire those lands from the private owners. You need good land records. You need to pay the compensation, huge compensation to all the land records. And that ROI has to be written on all that investment has to be seen in terms of bringing those businesses. So it can be big townships. So for example, if I go to Metropolitan Authority and say, we have got 100 hectares of piece of land there, and we are some thousand of owners, what we can do? So Metropolitan Authority says, okay, if you all come together, we can together launch a township there. Now, instead of I building my house and someone building my house and creating unorganized settlement, which is not economically viable, it will not attract businesses and all that. If land records are correct, everything is transparent, authorities know it, we all owners of land know it, what can be proposed is a planned township which can bring the businesses, utilities, and all kind of business hubs there, and this can yield a lot of basically returns on those kind of. So these kind of things are opportunities. So it's the industrial estates, it's the IT hubs, it's the probably infrastructure centers, or it can be also basically any kind of growth centers that are visualized as a part of Metropolitan Development Authority. These are a lot of business opportunities that exist when land records are together. But main concern I have seen is why this is not happening in a great pace, although land is there, everything, because people don't know that land records and people don't know each other, what we can do as a together, because records are not accessible, we don't know each other. And that is where it becomes a hurdle for launching those kind of schemes that will yield a lot of return on the investment. Yeah, thank you.
Got it. Yeah, I think makes sense. I mean, one of the analogies which I often take when I'm talking about land records, I mean, let's forget land records for a while, but Google Maps. Why do all of us always open Google Maps all the time? Even if I have to go to the same office every day from the same starting point, there is certain aspects of a city changing. There's more traffic, there's less traffic, there's more water clogging, whatever. There's updated information every single time, most of the time, which I can reliably trust that yes, it will tell me something, which is fairly insightful for me to take a decision on. And obviously now how that information is being collected, yes, Google Maps does have some questionable practices, not getting into all of that, but just looking at it from a purely utilitarian perspective, the reason I'm using a database like that is because it's updated all the time and it's fairly accurately representing the reality. But there's a cost of representing that reality. In the land record situation, I mean, one cost is obviously the actual economic cost of representing that reality, which is what you talked about, Shirish. On how does that data keep on getting updated? But then there's also, I feel, a social cost of representing that reality, which is that can the current data sources which are available really take into account the complex social reality? I mean, can the different conflicts around a certain piece of parcel of land be captured in the current data sources? I mean, what are the mechanisms for communities to have peer mechanisms to add data or to challenge data or to crowdsource data in a way where it sort of represents a more accurate piece of information? Like there's a lot of state and remote sensing data which we're definitely talking about, but what about other pieces of of data as well, which aren't so straightforward? And what sort of role does that play? Because at the end of the day, the land records we're talking about are land records of the people, often capturing reality of the people which we might not be aware of, or even our complex taxonomies and ontologies might not be aware of. How does that aspect sort of get baked in? And maybe Shana, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But before that, the person, the fifth person who was supposed to join, Sanjay, is here. Uh, Hey, hi Sanjay. Sorry, I didn't notice. I didn't check it. Could you maybe join us? We'll just pull another chair. Yeah. Yeah. So, Shana, if you could maybe quickly answer that, and then Sanjay can give his introduction.
Okay, so and I'm going to go back to your point about Google Maps and how we all use it. Now, Google Maps is very useful for figuring out how long it'll tell you to take a highway and drive from one place to another. It's exceptionally poor, even in a place at Bangalore, for telling me how I can walk to a Potter or find a local grocery store and things. And I think that is part of the problem in terms of what gets captured, and then when that gets captured, and especially if it's something like blockchain, right, that becomes hardened, right, and in a way it's reinforced. So it could be, say ownership versus use and things. And I don't think the models, as you pointed out, are necessarily complex enough of land tenure, but that to me is actually not a technical problem. If anything, I would imagine that technology may allow for a more complex conception of land rights and tenure, where you're able to include multiple sorts of attributes. You'd have to think of them. So I think in rural areas, we know that we're looking at soil quality, water, all of those, weather. In urban, there need to be a very different set of attributes, including uses, the costs, benefits, climate issues, also, and the underlying land ownership. And also, I think in some ways, we can't just focus on land, right? It becomes land, property, even what you call space, right? Because how people use properties for economic and social and livelihood purposes at different points in the day. So there is an informal land market even for a patch of, some of my work in Bombay, I have a paper on the political economy of this rent distribution, which shows how the market works fairly effectively to allocate this in urban areas. Right? It's not that there is no land market. We know that real estate markets are thriving in the absence of these records. I think where there will be a use case, one is that, and I'm imagining here that the technology is capable of improving, and then we have an effective governance and planning setup that has more capacity and will. Is that I think having a better, stronger system that captures more different types of tenure and uses and property relations, which I think in theory is possible, I think that can make for far more effective governance and planning. And I think our current planning system, it's sort of, we make plans, they are very static, they're meant to set in stone for 30 years, and then we have a land administration. And I think we have a very poor understanding of what the actual urban economy is, where growth is happening, what is driving growth, where transactions are happening. So I think having a better, stronger record, it will be better for administrators, planners, civil society organizations as well to monitor what's actually happening. Second, but I think in that case it will need to be, actually to be transparent, right? To be, the other thing is that I think again it will be really important for better regulation. And for determining, now one of the things we know that in a lot of urban areas, most of the land is public. I mean, it's state owned, but it's not public. And there we don't really have a conception of what is common property and what are common lands. And we know that everywhere we have developments without any thought about, so WRI has a paper looking at urbanization and the loss of blue green infrastructure. And we can map it, but that mapping does not let us, unless we actually know who owns, and in many cases it may be the government itself. And again, the land records will not be enough, but if we have a stronger system of institutions and policies and things, then we can address some of these planning and political economy issues related to the growth and functioning of our cities, I think. So I think that is where there is potential. But digitization is a small part of that. You will need a lot of other things for it to have to be able to yield these outcomes.
Sure. Yeah, maybe Sanjay, if you could just introduce yourself, get to know some of your thoughts on the broad topic.
Yeah, my name is Sanjay. I'm the founder and CEO of Landed. So we help properties essentially have like a blue tick mark next to them, similar to a social media profile to say that it's verified, simply put. So we help accessibility to various documents covering 23 states, EC, sale deeds, revenue registration records, maps, so on and so forth. Yeah, I think I broadly look at I come from a financial markets background, so I think similar asset classes, if you look at their development primordially, I think there's 3 phases to any asset class in terms of development. First is accessibility, second is transparency, and the outcome of that is transactability. So the first step to having transparency is having maximum number of stakeholders have easy access to what they want to transact. So essentially, you cannot have liquidity in the market if you don't have transparency. So how will we close a deal for a real estate project if people do not have a clear view on what is actually the market value and what is the clear title, what is the completeness of it? And there are markets, by the way, where things can be transparent and people don't have accessibility. So for the people in the financial markets, that could be shorting a particular security. You know that Reliance share price every single day, every single second, but not everybody has access to shorting it. But everybody can go long. So what I'm trying to say is giving maximal accessibility and visibility to all the stakeholders will naturally bring a lot of transparency to the market. And when a lot of transparency comes into the market, that's going to lead to a lot of lubrication for transacting any types of property, whether that's land, urban, rural, so on and so forth. And that not only is about transaction, it's also about financing, right? We often give this example of women in a UP maybe running a kirana shop for 20 years, wants to quickly get a loan, collateralize her store to either upskill herself or send her son for further education. If you walk through her shoes, how easy is it in India for her to simply walk into a bank and walk out with a loan? And why is it so difficult, right? And this, like, we can talk about a lot of high-level things, but just following a person's journey, and we do that a lot as part of our own company, where one day is given to field work, and we just tell them to walk through their footsteps and take a first-person perspective and what it is that people go through. And I think whether we sit in the government, regulation, private companies, it's very easy to get desensitized and anesthetized by steel, glass, and code, and not dirt, sweat, and actual people that need financing and deeper financialization of this asset class to move up in life, right? So,
yeah, no, makes sense. So, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, one is that with respect to all this which you're talking about enabling on top of land records, what is that line you see between the work which private players are doing versus what the state is doing? And what is the framework to maybe think about drawing that line?
I think it's almost 77 years now, right? Independence.
Yeah.
I think we've given many years for the government to take sole ownership of this. And we're still discussing about what we need to do. And they have a lot of priorities, right? So, there's a saying that 60% of India still lives on less than $2 a day. Amongst these priorities, where does the government? And why is it expected that in India, particularly, whenever we have a problem, the first port of call we say is, what is the government doing about it? Why are we putting so much burden on them? And why are we having so many expectations and people are disappointed? You need private sector participation if you really want to do well. See, even countries that have conclusive titling, right, have private sector participation. UK is a great example of a country that has conclusive titling, yet there are title insurers. So US has almost exact same land laws as India, yet the land records have come to be much clearer and more hygienic. And the reason for that is title insurance. So I think you need both players to participate. I don't think there's anything that says this is only the domain of the government or not. And I mean, we say this as a funny joke. We say presumptive titling and the burden of the ownership due diligence falls a lot upon the buyer here. As a country, we're very protective about our borders when another country comes and takes over our land, right? If regulators and governments look inside our borders and give the same importance towards personal property and respect to ownership, I think that adds a lot of confidence to people coming in. So if my land titles are not clear, and we have fractional ownership in agriculture, for instance, and you talked about agri before, how can I make a large capex investment? 30 years investment, right? When you're talking about capex, you're not trying to go for 2 years. You're not trying to go for 5 years. You're trying to make a 30, 50-year investment. And if I feel like that's going to be a problem for me, how can I deploy that kind of capital? So I think private sector participation is necessary. I think India has done, given what it has, a fairly good job so far of digitizing. But if you look at almost all developed countries, proper land records came first and development came later. It was a prerequisite, not a post. It just looks that way because we look at developed countries and say, oh, look, that's what they've done. They didn't do it after. It was a real catalyst towards development of that country.
Maybe I'd just like to hear other people's thoughts on the same question, and then we can open it up for questions. Dhruv?
Yeah, I mean, I think lots of interesting points, and I think lots of potentially debatable ones. I think I agree to a lot of them. I think there has to be some way to sort of force the function of getting this out, and I think there is a lot of lack of commercial investment because of the lack of transparency and the sort of, as I mentioned, the distributed and the fragmented nature of land and real estate in India. I think it still remains to be seen if government is bold enough to allow that to happen or not. I still think the marginalized community, though, we've got to figure out some of the social aspects she was talking about can't just be solved with technology and money. So that aspect, I don't have the answer, but I think that's an interesting sort of variation in India versus, let's say, UK or US. So I don't think technology is a problem. I think technology exists. I think it's more about how the intent from a government perspective to be able to solve this and some of the social aspects that we've touched on.
I think the role of the state is very critical because land is, they called it a fictitious commodity. It's so deeply embedded in lives, livelihoods, culture. So it's not the same sort of thing. And also you think about the externalities that accrue when it comes to how land is used, right? So if there's, say, a conversion of, say, what we call blue-green infrastructure, forest land, common property land for private use. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the state does the digitization or the mapping, but it's critically important that, that we have effective, accountable, and independent state institutions that are, overseeing, managing this process, designing policies, regulating it as well, to make sure that it ends up benefiting most Indians and Indian citizens, right? Not just private actors. And one should understand that you can't look to private actors for all that, that you are thinking about a poor woman getting a loan and things. There's no place in the world where that has really, led to, say, in most cases where you have had purely private and unregulated land records, you will tend to have problems like gentrification, land concentration, dispossession of land and things. So I think the state's role is absolutely critical. The other question was on, I forgot what was the other question? This was it, right? Yeah, so that's the, and I think the, increasingly with climate change and things, the state has to also, again, there was a point where we have too much state in urban areas and we don't need planning. The market is probably more driven by people's actual needs. But as the climate crisis happens, I think it's extremely important that the state protects and preserves natural resources, drainage channels and things. And I think that's where land records and property maps and all will be very important, to protect those and to make sure they're not encroached on. We know that is constantly a problem.
My take is just on, is kind of, before opening kind of remarks, this, any land development that, okay, you need very good land records, but there are some participants I see sitting from different countries also. So what is driving India into digitization of such a massive, massive effort of digitizing land records? It's enormous, because I had done it by my hands in organizations that are responsible. What is driving is the policy decision by the central government that every state should have digitized land records, and also there is kind of decision that every land parcel should have unique identification. Like now in India we have Aadhaar card, it's internationally famous. Every person has a unique ID for billions of people. So similarly, every parcel should also have it. Now states are complying because it's a federal structure, and this is what is driving. Now having that policy itself is enough? No. Then you need to also provide a very good policy of remote sensing that provides you the base map. So that policy is also in a place that allows you to use map of certain resolution to be used for certain purposes. You are not being blocked from using those kind of base maps. That policy is also very, very important. You also need a geospatial policy that talks of what kind of reference system you should use, so that maps prepared by one state also, they are interoperable with the map prepared from the other state or other districts. So entire nation, the georeferencing system is agreed. So you need those kind of national spatial data infrastructure and all that. So it's a lot of policy landscapes, and then data sharing, data security. All these policies also play a very, very important role. It's not simply digitizing land records and putting it. So this is what has led India on the journey of, digitizing such a enormous land records and getting. But often also people confuse that land records, digitization of parcel, it means linking it to only land registration, which is very, very complicated as a blockchain, and it will take a lot of time. It will happen. Meanwhile, how we can best use current maps for business case scenarios is, if we are preparing the development plans of our urban growth centers, because we are essentially talking about that area, these land records, whatever is available, they may not be very accurately representing areas and transactions, but they can clearly represent what happened in those land records in past 30, 40, 50 years. If you are allocating some zone as a residential zone, what happened in past years? Somewhere you allocate agriculture zone, but then 20 years back, agriculture has been stopped there. Farmers have sold it. And you put it as agriculture zone. You are blocking your own economic growth. Somewhere you are putting residential zone, and that might be landslide prone area, as you're talking about climate change and other things. So all these things are possible because of digitization. So normally there is a tendency of everybody, like land records digitization means all about land transactions and all that. No, It's a lot of other potentials that you can use of that digitized map, although they are not very accurate on basically planning your cities, planning urban growth centers better, resilient, apt, and thereby maximizing the return on the investment from those land, basically. This can be certainly done, and I think India has come to that particular stage that it is very well placed to utilize that information and make the best of the best urban development plan, although there is still time needed for getting into dynamic land, capturing the land record, injection, mutation, and all. But I think it will also have one time positive on that.
Thank you. So Rishabh was more interested in use cases. And in the data in the current form, whatever we get out of it, because I suggest it should not be divided by urban, rural, state. It should be a seamless one. Seamless means there is no segregations. Once we display, once we maybe publish it, should be a seamless data of urban, rural, across the state. And somehow Rishabh has also brought in some very good use case. It is going to be, he was talking about Google Map. In fact, this data can derive very good derived maps. That we say is when we have these plots are in place already, we can have so many use cases, AI applications to derive the data, deriving the data from the already existing. One can be the route maps, which will never get lost. Right now, you know, Google Map, you take you to some river and put you somewhere else. Once you have this derived map, you can have so many applications. I can say the government can think of maybe 1,000 applications, derived use cases. Private can think of even millions of use cases out of it. Definitely, because what I say is, definitely government cannot even create the 100 because the private has to help out in deriving the use cases, giving the applications and so on. Today, you know, you think about digitization, anything, the private, the NGOs, the government, everyone is part of that. The use cases is going to be enormous. So one thing probably Sirish forgot, 20 years back we created the plot map for MIDC, in which we published which plot is available, vacant plots, available plots, and which is published for the MIDC, Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, around 20 years back, which was available over the web. Somebody could go there and see whether this plot is available so I can buy this. And also one suggestion is all these public properties or the government property should be visible to everyone, so that the government can either give to someone for some particular purpose and derive enough revenue out of it. So if you don't know what is available to you nearby, we don't know how much somebody is bidding or what is the amount it is amount. So this case, if you have these information available to public, enormous amount can be generated. Actually, there is no need of maybe taking tax out of it. And everything, you have 2 toilets, you have 1 toilet, you give the tax. See, such type of things will not be required. We have enough properties, enough land. The government wants lands which can generate enough revenue for us. So just letting some of the use cases. Because the use case is going to be enormous. We have so many government departments. Each one is having so many utilities, so many applications. Many people want to develop so many applications. For example, we have developing PMGSY, National GIS, there is a GeoSedec application. So many agencies approaching us to develop. But that is not for a government to do that. That private has to come into picture, and it's already some use cases already defined. Now the private has to come in and take out those utilities and why to do and extend it. End of the day, what you require is you need to generate revenue out of it. So the government may not be getting into all the utilities. Probably we will be giving you, okay, such and such utilities are there. So that was the one thing I just wanted to make it out. And yeah, that's all. I think anything further about, because that is what I'm talking about, the current form. That is for the public, that is for the decision makers. But going to the landowner, to me, for example, him, there is a lot of improvement. That will come as the technology progress, that will come. But as on today, there are enormous utilities. The data is going to be too much useful. Derived applications are going to be enormous with reference to these. It will definitely going to come with us, and people are going to use it. Even if Rishabh get one state to the routing application, we'll be more than happy to generate enough, like, thank you.
You know, I just wanted to add one really important point, and we don't have time to go into it. I think, Sandeep, speaking to your point, I think you were referring to this idea that there are arguments that having clear private property rights was essential to development in the West. And I think equally important, though, is to, even in the US case, and it was done in an extremely unfair way, that those property rights were, I mean, there was some process of land distribution and allocation to people who didn't have land. So there, of course, they pushed Native Americans off the land and things, but there, the land, and it's a land-rich country, it was allocated to migrants coming in, people who could develop the land. And I think when you talk about having an equitable, sustainable sort of land record system or a land management system, I think we really need to go back to questions of land distribution and who actually owns land versus just, say, digitizing the existing sorts of land possession and land records and ownership, because that will inevitably produce and maybe harden an already very unequal system. And I think historically that a more even and equitable distribution of land has been very important to development as well.
It's a very good session, sir. Here we mostly talked about land records. What do you people think? Is that digitalized records or any physical records, as per your opinion? I'm just asking that. No. Here we are talking mostly about the land records. As you people think land records in the sense, is that digitalized or physical records? You are talking about digitalized records, but those are the records, not the actual thing. What are the records having after getting the resettlement operation done 100 or 80 years back? Those are the actual records. Whatever the having the data in digitalized, those are the not the exact data. Whatever the computer operators are uploaded in Rush. Because why I am saying that records what government have, those records are not updated one and they are not incorporated. If even these urbanized areas is also extended from the rural areas only. That records is also having with the revenue officials, and those records are not incorporated. Either that land is given for any acquisition or assignments, those also they didn't incorporated on the records. But these people after nowadays these are digitalized and they are just enter the data basing on that recent data whatever they have without cross-check with the base data. And that the same data is registration is also doing the same. Even registration department, what they are doing registrations is it's not ultimate. That actually that land having a right powers to be vested with the revenue department. Whatever the lands having with, when that mutations and also doing by the revenue department. And but my suggestion is that I am not that person to suggest to any government or anything, but in India, resettlement operation should be taken place. Then only these records should be updated, because without taking these resettlement operations, without taking place, because resurvey is going on, that resurvey is also based on the what having the present record. That's what I just want to share that. But one more, I just want to ask Sanjay. As that I just cross-checked with states records and all in your website. Is that taken from the user-friendly data, or you collaborated with the governments?
Just as one just simple specific questions. No, land record management is a developmental zone, where technology has played an important role. All of you already said this. Yeah, all of, yes. Yeah, all of you said land record management is a developmental zone where technology has played a pivotal role. And I'm sure that technology will further improve and, there will be a lot of improvement, especially in the spatial and geospatial technologies and digital technology companies, all sort of things, including blockchain technology and all. In this evolutionary process, how do we focus on, especially on the evolving social and institutional issues? How much we invest on this, especially on the social issues? If there is any change in resolution, for instance, there are a lot of social responses, social issues. How we are going to cope up these social issues? How we are going to address these legal and other institutional issues? These are some of the specific questions.
Because I am little disappointed that you don't mind. You come from a different urban area, you could have cited your urban area. Bhubaneswar, Marathi, Bombay, you spoke all general, technology. For example, I am heading 2 urban land records in Bhubaneswar. How do we see land records technology apply? In 2014, we had also survey, final publication. All the land tenures, quit rent, they will not pay rent. Devotor land, the promoter land, Sikkim tenancy, Sikkim tenant, without you cannot sell the land, neither Bharta. You will not address. Then similarly, Jolasai, water body, jungle land, fraud, land grabbing, hath pota. We have this one spoke something land tenures. In the entire Bhubaneswar is the land of Lord Lingaraj. These Brahmins, so many Devotar services, they have sold the land. You don't have right. They take it for permanent minor. How the hell the technology will capture? We are adopted after the technology 2014 also. Technology not because I did research published by Cambridge University, technology nothing but vendor driven. I was also director land record. It's all technical vendors are dominating money, all 454 satellite data, they all took money also. Slums, so different. Land, urban areas, nothing you had our time to say, or urban nexus. Somebody occupying street vendor, land grabbing, 10 people are occupying, middle class, get it from you. How the hell will address? This is very important issue. That is that technology.
Okay, thank you. My name is Konstu from Ethiopia. I do have 2 questions, which I don't know for whom I'm just referring these questions, but this is directly, it might not be directly related to land recording, but it is part of it. Regarding these urban-rural boundary issues, especially when we are doing planning, these are most difficult issues in our planning experience, especially most of the nearby the urban areas which are near to the rural parts, which are near to the peri-urban, and also the urban areas are just bounded or included within the urban areas, the administrative area of, the nearby rural areas are incorporated into the urban boundaries. So how you are just managed these urban and planning boundaries, especially when you are taking the recordings of the land pertinent to the small landholders in the nearby areas. Thank you.
My name is Ashoka Reddy from Karnataka State Remote Sensing Center. I am retired. See, sir, this is land records developed by the Britishers. Once the Britishers developed, at the time it is a very accurate, more clear document. That document, till today in Karnataka, 30,366 villages, out of which 50 to 60 villages not traceable. This purpose, the government of India, I don't know, state government, insisting for, so all the records digitized. Once digitized, again, the Survey Settlement Land Record Department there came to our center, see that one-to-one map, whether digitized map, and then that Britishers surveyed map. It is comparison. Is there any changes? Nothing. And then accurately, these map integrated entire Karnataka from this one, Chamarajanagar to up to be the single map. in that map, we have to delineate the hydrological units. So many developmental activity we are taking from these cadastral land records, sir. Automatically, we can overlay on the satellite, high resolution satellite data also, more accurate, more information. And then this watershed department, World Bank, crores of rupees they are spending, out of which today they are spending 5 to 10 crore rupees for smallest hydrological unit. After 5 years, what are the changes occurred? Wasteland reduced, agriculture land increases, cropland, is there any water? Like so many, this one, improvement occurred in this. So that's why the satellite remote sensing center, it gives more accurate. This World Bank people, they are not accepting for the statistics. Only see that the satellite images give the horticulture crop increasing, cropland increasing, water body, storages, everything. We can see that impact study, agriculture resource development, water resource development, how much. That's why this is a satellite remote sensing, it gives more real and then actual information about this. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
I think probably you were talking about the cadastral map you talking about. What, see, when it is land records, you are concerned about your land, isn't it? That's what you are talking about. Your land. Yeah, basically the land boundaries. See, as far as I understand, the original land records which you are talking about, that is scanned and kept it. Probably tomorrow somebody is going to present it Maharashtra sees. So the digitization is something different. We keep it. And another, the original record, which is accurate, which has been mapped using the chain survey, that remained, that is scanned, and most of the states that they are keeping it, that is a final. That is going to be final. Yeah, understand. Yeah, understood. Yeah, understood. Yeah, understood. So the final. The base record, see, the base record which you have the line, all these parameters, they, no, that is not the debate. You commented, they remain there. No, they are accurate. And whatever the digitization is going to come is something different. You may not be able to relate to that. If you measure it, the satellite data, what we are capturing, there will be some shift, some changes. But the final is going to be your original land record, which is having the chain survey and the line. That is what is going to be. And over the years, that we can take it up. See, initially we were talking about. And he was talking about even the boundaries. The great contribution of what we are going to have this land records is even the boundary delineation of automatic delineation of boundaries. Even the state boundaries, even the block boundaries, even the national boundaries, if I look at today, they are an issue. And whatever, so there is a authority who is giving the boundaries, they are supposed to be correct, even though they may not be correct, they may in the actual scenario. But the land records, which is going to give you more accurate boundaries.
I don't think it frankly matters whether it's urban or rural when you look at land records. And I think we are at a great danger of being left behind if we say technology doesn't matter. This is not 1940s, right? 2024. So it's a critical ingredient to what we need to do, and it's a tool. It's not the only solution as people look at it. It's a tool that amplifies your work, refines it, makes everything faster, and makes a lot of things accessible to a lot of people. So urban and rural, I don't think matter. I think those distinctions need to go away. And in terms of records, I've seen all kinds of records where things are supposedly clean. You still have a hard time getting a building approval. You can In India, you can get any document that you really need, even if it's 100 years old, as long as somebody's willing to pay enough money and is willing to wait enough time. There is no such thing as you cannot get it. That's a fact. We've gotten documents that are 80 years old before Nizam's time. So if you want to really check land records that go back that are not digitized, you can get Pahanis. They come from Nizam's lineage in Telangana. You can get RTCs that go really far back in Karnataka, right? Like you can get old wills. It's just somebody is willing to pay enough, and you give me enough time, I'll come and get it. I often say we're in the 4D business, time being a critical, important dimension for documentation. So typically we look at 13 to 30 years because that's a banking time. And regards to what ma'am said earlier, I don't think India is at risk of getting gentrified anytime soon. There's inequality, but I don't think there's a risk of gentrification. And when we're talking about United States, I want to make something very clear about the records. It's probably the single most successful real estate investor in the world. Majority of U.S. growth didn't come from land zoning or things like that. It came from Louisiana Purchase from France. It came from purchase of Florida from Spain. It came from purchase of Alaska from Russia. It came from Max and Gordon from Mexico. These are purchases. That's how the country has grown. Population density is not an issue. Indians, yes. I think every subgroup in every country you can say has been victimized and marginalized. But the solution is not to stop development. You need as many stakeholders as you can get, you need as much investment as you can get, and you need as much feedback from the public as you can get. Like, we talked about government platforms. I think they're awesome. But ultimately, do people really go and want to fill those out? I know in Maharashtra and Mumbai, for instance, majority of the people still get their documents through an agent. They don't use Bulek or Mahabhumi or a lot of these things, right? Even rural documents, we procure those, right? Exactly. All these are procurable. If anybody's ever tried to get a visa to come to India and try to fill it out from outside, imagine that documentation and how that application looks like. So it's much, much worse. Can a single woman go to an SRO today and stand in line in most places and cities? I think it's very difficult. Look at those lines. There's a reason lazening people exist in India. And unfortunately, many people don't like to talk about them. There's an entire class of professionals that exist in India that only are there to function between you and the government. So,
maybe if you can quickly get closing remarks by the other panelists and then close. Okay. So we'll get to you last.
Well, I will just say that I don't have the answer to how we can solve the social problems, but I mean, and I'm not entirely skeptical about technology because I think if these are actually transparent and open, they can at least provide an entry point into a process where people, start understanding how land is used and distributed and start having these conversations. So maybe it can be a starting point. I think the point you made about it's fairly true. I think all the conversation I found is highly abstract. There are a lot of claims made. And I think these processes will unfold in there is a lot of gentrification happening in Indian cities. It depends where you go, right? And then the small town. So I think what will really sharpen this discourse and let us better understand what sort of use cases and outcomes is really having much more specific data. And one of the things one would imagine is that now we have all this data, someone should actually analyze it and see what sort of outcomes. I have to say that from other countries, all these grand claims, almost all of them, including the DeSoto, poor people will get access to bank credit and start investing and become entrepreneurs. There's very little. I would say the biggest outcome or the biggest what land digitization and titling seems to have done is the financialization, commodification, and concentration of land. So it made it more, so what you were saying about made it more available for global financial. So the US, someone sitting in the US wants to continue their great history of making effective real estate purchases, they can do that. I haven't seen much evidence to see that it's actually had benefits for the poor, and I think that's because it has not been driven by that. So a system that would do that would be designed differently and would think about issues of distribution, ownership, of complex land rights, collective rights, and things which I don't think our current system in India is. Oh, sorry.
You? Okay, just, I mean, not really replying, but just concluding remark in 1 minute, that if you do this job by hand, you will imagine it is really enormous, and to that extent, India has taken a great stride in that. It will go on improving as the satellite images go on improving. So currently we are not talking of that accuracy, but geographic information system, maps are the only evidence-based information. And what happens in that particular land in terms of its use, whether there is well, there is a factory, there is a house, there is something. This is the evidence that comes from the space technology and in the bound. This is the only evidence-based information, and that's why it has lots of use cases, including finding the unauthorized constructions or taxing the upcoming. So there are lots of good things. So what we have to look at it is not really criticizing that, looking at, oh, will it capture 100 years of record? It will eventually. We are in the journey, it will. But as of now, having that in digital form is having an evidence-based information that support rest of the historical information, which will eventually get attached. And as of now, in Maharashtra, when this particular thing, land record was digitized, I was told 23 major ministries of Maharashtra are hugely utilizing these land records for daily businesses, whether it is construction, dam, acquisition of land around the road, exactly locating who are the farmers, whom to pay and all that. So 23 departments are intensively using these land records, which otherwise were in great difficulties, and the infrastructure projects were delayed by years and years, which are now on much faster pace. So this is the utility of digitalization, or you can say the geospatial information that brings to the country basically. I think we have to look at it positive and look at it as a journey that will go towards the perfection. Thank you. Yeah.
You want to say something? Okay. Thanks a lot. I think we've opened many more threads than we could close. So I'm sure there is a lot that'll happen offline post this discussion. He's one of the plenary speakers.